Speaking yesterday, President Obama said he was sending the Attorney General Eric Holder to the St. Louis suburb and called for restraint.
To a community in Ferguson that is rightly hurting and looking for answers, let me call once again for us to seek some understanding rather than simply holler at each other. Let's seek to heal rather than to wound each other. As Americans, we've got to use this moment to seek out our shared humanity that's been laid bare by this moment.
So less than 80 days to go until the US voters head to the polls for the midterm elections. There is a growing consensus the situation in Ferguson could have an impact. Republicans are expected to easily take the Senate, although a larger concern to Democrats may be mounting anxiety about immigration. Polls indicate the issue has risen in the minds of voters to become the most important concern facing the country. That's fascinating, isn't it? James Boyes is a US political historian and author of the forthcoming book, Clinton's Grand Strategy, and joins us now. Just take one step back, if I may. Why is immigration an issue in the United States of all countries in a period of growing employment and economic growth? I understand with growing unemployment and economic contraction why immigration is always a hot topic, but at this stage of the cycle I would have thought it become less of an issue rather than more.
You'd think, but I think if you look at what's going on the borders there, where you have the stories of thousands of children being sent in to the United States undocumented without their parents, there's a very emotional element to this, I think, and I think Barack Obama and the overall administration are really struggling to know how to come to terms with this. It's also something which has very localized political implications within the United States, in those southern borders, Texas, New Mexico, for example, where there's a lot in stake and in play, I think.
I'm again confused, and I'll tell you why. Because I understood that the Mexican economy was doing rather well, actually. It's always the one that commentators on Central and Southern America talk about now as the standout outperformer when talking about those areas. And I thought under the current government they were benefiting from reform of their economy, plus an improved relationship with the United States, and obviously acting as a country which exports largely into the States. I'm surprised that immigration is such a hot topic because of the strength of the Mexican economy. Yeah,
it's interesting, but I think there's a misconception. These people are not coming. They're coming through Mexico, but they're not necessarily Mexican. They're coming from places on the isthmus in Central America, for example, places like, Salvador, for example, Venezuela. There is a whole sort of triangle down there of nations which are almost verging on failed states, and they are very much sending their populations to the United States. And the administration, to be fair, even beforehand under George W. Bush, successive American administrations have failed to come to terms with how to address this emotional issue of immigration into the United States, a nation born of immigrants, of course.
Yeah.
Do you think the response was heavy-handed in Ferguson? I mean, we were just talking about how militarized the American police force in that state seems to be.
I think
and I think we're surprised to see what's taken to the streets at times to push back relatively peaceful protests.
Well, that word is relative. I think that...
I mean, there's clearly been some looting, and some people have used the opportunity as camouflage to go and break into stores and things. But largely, I think there's a genuine protest, isn't there, about what's seen as excessive use of force?
Well, I think there's no doubt about it that the overwhelming use of force by the forces on the streets did appear to be overhanded. It was interesting that looking at the President's remarks last night, that he's taking an attempt to distance himself away from the idea of putting the National Guard on the streets. You look back to the 1960s when President Kennedy was in a similar situation. They actually federalized the Guard there, for example. Here you've got Governor Nixon deciding to put the troops on the streets. The White House was not immediately behind that. The President, I thought, gave an interesting set of remarks last night. I don't know where his tie disappeared to all of a sudden in those remarks, but I think he was trying to walk a very fine line between coming down on the side of law and order and yet not wanting to get involved with the whole sort of emotional issue, as he did, for example, after the Trayvon Martin shooting.
The president is in an impossible position, though, on this one, isn't he? As a black American president, in a case that now involves the shooting of a black man who may or may not have been involved in committing a criminal act. That's not clear to me at this stage, but apparently he was shot 6 times. The president has to come out and both support the blue line of the police force, but on the other hand, he will be criticised by both the right and the left for the position he takes.
Absolutely. I mean, he's the president of the United States. He takes it from both sides, both left and right, on most issues. And I think one of the problems that Obama has got is that he has really failed, I think, to forge a governing consensus, bringing a team of politicians from both left and the right on most issues. I think he's uniformly failed, I think, to work very well with Congress on that basis. I think what's fascinating, talking about the racial issues, is that when he got elected, people began talking about a post-racial United States. I think it's clear that that has not occurred. Obama talked famously in 2004 about there is no red state, blue states, there is only the United States. There clearly are serious racial tensions in the United States. It may not be a segregated community as it once was some 50 years ago, but it's clearly a separated community. African Americans make up between 13 and 14% of the United States, but clearly they are very separate from the rest of the community on many issues.
But it's not just race, is it? It's the 99 to 1% ratio as well. It's the fact that 1% of the US population has done incredibly well out of this US recession, and the other 99% actually haven't seen their incomes rise, have seen really tough times as well. And it's a segregation, not necessarily on racial lines, that is the key here, isn't it?
It's possible, but I mean, you know, what are we talking about here? We're not talking about 99% of the American population rioting and becoming involved in these issues. There's clearly great issues to do with poverty, to do with black role models amongst the male community. And I think, coming back to your initial question, what is fascinating
the
about
greatest black role model in the White House
is meant to be, that's my point entirely. You took the words right out of my mouth. It is fascinating that Obama was very happy to talk about race issues before he was president. I expect him to be a great advocate for black role models after he's left the White House. He has distinctly decided not to be the black American president, I think. And I think the black community, people like Al Sharpton, for example, are taking great umbrage with that.
Nicola, give you the last question. Let's just look at some live shots as well, if we could do that, because we can take live pictures here. So we'll put up the live pictures.
So, I mean, just coming back to some of the issues on the economics of all of this, to me it seems that a lot of integration, about bringing people into a community, is also about access to education. And one of the things that has become increasingly expensive in the US and increasingly difficult is access to education. How do you see education policies in this setting? Do you think it's something that people link to economics?
I think that what you're seeing is there is a clear divergence between a determination to get a better educated workforce, but I don't believe that a lot of people in the African American community necessarily believe that they've got full access to that. I think there's a cycle of poverty and a sense of desperation that comes forth. I think if you look at the events that happen on the streets over the last couple of days, I'm constantly reminded of the classic Tom Wolfe text, the bonfire of the vanities. And when you have people like Al Sharpton, for example, who was after all an inspiration for one of the characters in that book, coming forward and calling upon people like Hillary Clinton to get involved, for Jeb Bush to get involved in the ongoing debate upon race issues, which links in obviously with education, because being in the Clintons, they are very big on people getting educated.
Very short on time. What's your new book about? Clinton's grand strategy. Which Clinton?
That's on Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
It's looking very much at how Bill Clinton comes in as a candidate in 1992, focusing upon domestic renewal. He becomes president of the United States, overturning the mandate of George H.W. Bush, the foreign policy president, and has to wage a whole new foreign policy concept to deal with the emerging New World Order, effectively, that Bush spoke of as president.
And he did one thing that I think a lot of people would like to see done in the United States, and that's have another go at reforming the tax code. Yeah. Clinton didn't want to do it, but ultimately got pressured into it because of the state of the government budget. So ironic that it was a Democrat that ultimately got to grips with the tax issue in the United States.
Do you think it's done? I think the tax code now is longer than it's ever been.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
A lot of people say it needs serious reform at the moment, but who's got the appetite?
And it's fascinating, in the election we just went through in 2012, both Democrats and Republicans, Mitt Romney very much praising Bill Clinton's time in office, when of course he was the bête noire for Republicans whilst he was
Let's talk about that a lot more. When's the book out?
Back end of the year.
All right, we'll talk about that then. We'll get you back on. Nice to see
Thank you.
James Boyce talking to us about the situation in the United States at the moment. Right.